Hello, are you ready to test your grammar? Here is the first sentence. Hello, good morning. Can you see the fireplace in the background? That's what the noise is. By the time you watch this video, it'll probably be in November. I'm recording it in first week October. It's already quite cold and I need to have my fireplace on, so that's what you can hear. You might see a reel, which is probably a bite-sized video. I do post reels, so like you know what's coming up. But by the time you sit and watch this video, the full video that is, it'll be November, because I schedule my posts about 3 weeks ahead. So by the time you watch the post, they've been sitting in the business planner for about 3 weeks. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue focusing on formal English. You might ask me, why do I need to do formal English? In it, some people might want to know, why do I need to use formal English? Well, that's because you're not going to be writing as you speak. Quite a number of you are students, university students, or you're probably in secondary school. You are journalists, bloggers, maybe some of you work for your government, or majority of you that follow the page say that you're writers. So if you're a writer, you're going to be using English, beg your pardon, formally, aren't you? Sometimes. When you obviously giving your characters words, direct speech, or when they're thinking, you might use everyday or colloquial English, informal English. But most of the time, I expect you're going to use English either as if you were writing for academic purposes, or basically as if other people were going to read your book. So you're going to write informal English, aren't you? Let me tell you something before I move on. When I started this page, there was a Sierra Leonean geezer who liked to write poetry. He was one of those people who was impacted by the Sierra Leonean War that lasted from 1991 to, I think, 2002. So he told me that he was a school dropout. One of the first things I noticed about this gentleman was that he couldn't work with perfect tenses. Perfect tenses were the bane of his life. So I said, well, let's do a workshop. This was going back to January 2022 when he was a page follower. That's when I started doing these workshops. And lo and behold, he disclosed something to me, which I wasn't aware of. He said, well, I have a mentor, and my mentor is a lecturer at Fourabay College. Fourabay College, for viewers who are from abroad, is part of the University of Sierra Leone. So this gentleman, he had a trick up his sleeve. When I said, are you struggling with your tenses? He then decided to use his mentor, and he would write a poem and just send it off to the mentor, and the mentor would either point out what mistakes he made or maybe correct them on his behalf. I don't know. I don't want to implicate people. I'm not in Sierra Leone. I don't know. But basically, he sent me another poem after a while. I noticed that his tenses, like he sort of mastered perfect tenses. So I thought, oh, well, you're doing well. You're probably reading my notes on the page, my posts, and you're probably working with me, or I don't know, maybe doing what I was just doing, do some background reading to improve your tenses. He wasn't, because when we were then speaking on Facebook Messenger, he was still making the mistakes he was making, but his form read better than what he was saying in his messages. Basically, don't get anyone to rewrite your piece. Don't get anyone to help you with your story or your poem. We have a writing competition open. There's a practice that is coming in Sierra Leone where you have a mentor who might be maybe a university lecturer or an established writer or someone, and then you send it off to the mentor to check it. That's cheating. We call that cheating. It gives you an unfair advantage. So mentors are not there to rewrite what you've written for you. It's very obvious when a person is writing one way and then another person helps them, because you can see the effect of another person's style in their work. How do I say it? Even if it's not obvious, don't do it. You know, Voice of Sierra Leone support us. Voice of Sierra Leone have given us a slot on their radio station in Sierra Leone, FM 91.9. So I follow Voice of Sierra Leone. And I think it was the last one, that sort of video, a very moving video by this girl. She was quite tearful. She's a student. She wanted to bring something to the attention of ministers. Everything has to be brought to the attention of ministers. I don't know why she had to say that. She could just done the video. Anyway, so she was saying that during an exam, the teachers were calling out the answers to the students in Sierra Leone. She'd revised for her exam. And then she sat there and the teachers were giving her the answers, the correct answers. I mean, we need to move away from these malpractices where you have to be given the answer. Someone has to check your work, So please do not send your story off to anyone else if you're going to enter a competition. I had a sneaky suspicion last time that someone had been helped to write their story. As a result, she wasn't longlisted. As a result, I was reading the story and I don't even know this young lady. I don't know who she is. She was not longlisted. Because it's unfair for someone else who is writing by themselves because they're making the same mistakes. And someone sent you a story that's so well written, you know what I mean? They haven't won any competition. No one's heard about them. They're not Panabum Halliwell. How comes they're writing us over English? So my suspicions were aroused. I don't know what happens in countries like Malawi, Zambia, Nigeria. Post in the comment section whether you have issues with people being assisted as well and having an unfair advantage. So I'm going to go indoors to look at active and passive voice because you won't hear my squeaky voice above that fireplace, would you? Okay, so I'm where it's quiet now. I do hope the telly doesn't bother you, and neither does my water fixture. I've got an aquarium and there's a water feature there that makes bubbles. It's not the quietest of features. I could have got a better one, but I've got to say I like this one. It makes bubbles. So if you can hear anything in the background today, it's the telly and it's the water feature. So why do we use the active voice? And why would we use the passive voice? When you speak ordinarily in everyday use of English, you're going to use the active voice. Maybe you like saying things like, they said this, and they said that, they did that. Generally, when you speak, you're going to put your subject in the initial position. And that's going to be followed by a verb, and it's going to be followed by an object, or maybe a complement, but as an adjunct. That's generally how we use English every day. What if you were a journalist or a blogger? If, like myself, you had to go to a magistrate court and say you had to use legal jargon, say you were a police constable, or if you were, say, maybe you're writing for an exam, maybe you can use an English in an academic setting, you're doing your master's or you're doing your dissertation, writing your thesis or your dissertation. What about if you were a government employee, a civil servant? How would you write? So obviously how you write formally is different from how you speak. One aspect is the passive voice. So when the subject is in the initial position and is followed by a verb or an object, we call that the active voice. That's to say the subject is acting on the verb. I don't mean the subject is playing up. Let me give an example. My example will be, they eat cassava leaves in Sierra Leone. They eat cassava leaves in Sierra Leone. Please have a look at my sentence on the screen. I'm going to put that in another way. And the verbs I'm going to be using today are going to come from our auxiliary bank. They are going to be the verbs to be and the verbs to have. From the verb to be, I'm going to be using the auxiliaries is and are, been, B-E-I-N-G, and been, B-E-E-N. From the verb to have, I'm going to be using H-A-S, maybe not, and H-A-V-E. So basically, I'm going to be using H-A-V-E a lot more. So basically, I'm going to be using the verbs to be in various forms, and I'm going to be using the verb to have, using either have, H-A-V-E, or has, to form the passive voice. What else am I going to be working with today? I'm going to be working with the third form of the verb. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I need to remind you that I have a reel on the feed. If you pay any attention to any of the boring things I do on here. If you're not here to laugh at my bad Chichewa jokes or my jokes in Creole, if you're here to enrich yourself and improve your life skills and to use the page as you were meant to use it as it was intended, then you would follow my posts with religious precision. And one of the things you would have seen would be the reel that shows you how to find a verb in a dictionary. And I used the Collins English Dictionary online edition, and I showed you that with the verb sing, for example, S-I-N-G, if you look it up, Collins English Online, go to Google, in the search bar, type S-I-N-G, meaning Collins, double L. Have a look at what's on the screen.
In a dictionary, you can look up different verb forms. Using the Collins and Cambridge English dictionaries, I'm going to demonstrate how this is done. Collins gives you the definition of the verb and then shows you how to pronounce it. Sing. It's very helpful, as it goes on to show you the third person singular variation. Clara sings beautifully. The present participle is also listed, singing. Singing is the gerund to, which can be used as an ing word without an auxiliary. Singing is Clara's hobby.
Double L. And then you might come up with this. The definition of sing is to make a melodious sound. And then you also should see the phonetic pronunciation thing in slashes, like parentheses. Further down, you should see the variations of the verb. Third person singular, she sings. Isata sings melodiously. Past simple sang. Isata sang the national anthem yesterday. Third form of the verb, the ed form, is what we're going to be using today. And it's, with irregular verbs, it changes, it varies. With the verb to sing, it's sung. Isata has just sung the national anthem, S-U-N-G. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be working with the third form of the verb. There's no excuse now to speak bad English. There's no excuse, because the internet makes grammar accessible. So learn to use the internet. Go online and look up things in a dictionary. I don't want to digress, but I speak to lots of writers. They don't use dictionaries. They don't use thesaurus. What sort of writer are you? Don't answer that. It was a rhetoric question. So let's go back to my example. Begin with the present tense. They eat cassava leaves in Sierra Leone. I'm going to break down my sentence. They is my subject pronoun. Eat is my verb in the simple present tense. Cassava leaves is my noun phrase. In Sierra Leone, preposition followed by a noun phrase. So I'm going to put in Sierra Leone in parentheses, in brackets. I don't want it to confuse me. I'm going to look straight away for my object. What is my object? Generally follows a verb. Not always, because they're always free. When I look at sentences further in the workshop where you have to find the object. So for now, I'm looking at basic sentences to improve your skill and confidence. So cast for leaves is what follows my verb. I'm going to say that's what is receiving my action. It's not a transitive verb only in this case, but we're looking at what follows the verb. The object is what is receiving the action from the subject and the verb. I'm going to put my cast for leaves in the initial position. Cast for leaves is, because cast for leaves is a dish. Don't tell me cast for leaves are eaten. I'm not talking about individual leaves. Cast for leaves is plus my participle eaten, because I don't want to say cast for leaves eats people, do I? It makes no sense. So my sentence in the passive voice is cast for leaves is eaten in Sierra Leone. Cast for leaves is eaten in Sierra Leone. Let me go quiet so you can have a look at the sentence on the screen. Now I have borrowed the auxiliary is from the verb to be, and I've used my participle eaten. So in the passive voice, we flip the sentence. It begins with the object. All right. My sentence in the passive voice has read, cast for leaves is eaten in Sierra Leone. I have omitted the unnamed subject, they. You're going to ask me, why haven't you said cast for leaves is eaten in Sierra Leone by them? Because I don't need that information. It's now redundant. Them is an unnamed subject. In Creole, we say, den say, den do. We don't know who they is. So I'm not going to use that in the passive voice. I'm going to leave it out. I'm going to omit it. So I've used is because the verb is in the first sentence, is in the present tense. Let's just remind ourselves of what the different verb forms are, because this is why I start to confuse people. Eat is the base form. So if you look up the word to eat in the dictionary, you'll have eat, maybe consuming something as its definition. And then the past form will be ate, and then the ed or the third form will be eaten. Let's look at one example in the present continuous. Isita is feeding the chickens. Isita is feeding the chickens. Have a look at the sentence, please. It's in the active voice, isn't it? You're going to tell me that Isita is my subject and is feeding is my verb phrase. It's a phrase because there are two verbs. The chickens is my object. The chickens, isn't it? A nominal phrase beginning with the determiner. This is a very simple sentence just to improve your confidence, and so you can flip this sentence quite easily, can't you? We're going to start with the chickens. So we've now got a plural what? Subject. What are we going to use? Did you have the chickens are? Are you in trouble now? Because you can't say the chickens are fed, because that's not what we're saying. We're using a continuous tense. So let's pause for a minute. When we're using the present continuous or the past continuous tenses in the passive voice, we're going to go back to our auxiliary bank and we're going to use the word being. Where you have a main verb with an ing, in the passive voice, you're going to use another verb with ing. That's the rule, isn't it? So the chickens are being fed. I'm in trouble now, because how am I going to bring in my original subject, Isata, which is now in the object position? I can say the chickens are being fed Isata. The chickens are not eating Isata. Except we're looking at anthropomorphism, where we write in a story about chickens having human attributes. We're not. We're not writing a fantasy story where the chickens are eating Isata. I need a preposition. I need a preposition to explain how the action is being done, how the action is taking place. And the preposition I'm going to use is the word by, by. I'm going to say, the chickens are being fed by Isata. So have a look at my new rule, please. My passive voice is now, the chickens are being fed by Isata. My sentence in the passive voice is, the chickens are being fed by Isata. I'm going to go quiet so you can have a look at the sentence on the screen. Did you see how I borrowed the word being from the verb to be? I'm getting my notes, which I made earlier. That's what I did. Wherever there is a present or past continuous tense, I am going to be using being to form the passive voice. For future tenses, I will use another word. Are you ready to move on to the present perfect tense? Here's my sentence in the active voice. Isata has fed the chickens already. Isata has fed the chickens already. That's in the active voice. Have you identified your subject and your object? If you said Isata was the subject and has fed is the verb phrase, the chickens is the object, and then you put your adverb already, did you put it in parentheses because you don't need it for now, then you've done very well. So I'm going to flip my sentence. I'm going to start off with my object, the chickens. Forget about already. Forget about that. Put it in brackets. The chickens. What have you got? You're in trouble now. I'm in trouble because I need another auxiliary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my auxiliary bank and I'm going to borrow the verb to have. Have a look at my new rule, please. So the passive voice now works with what? The verb to have plus auxiliary plus past participle. Excuse me. Oops, excuse me. Now I need a drink of water. I'm going to pause this video to go and have a drink of water. The chickens have been fed by Isata. The chickens have been fed by Isata. I'm going to pause this video. So have a look at the sentence on the screen. So I've changed locations again. It's better when I use my computer because I can refer to the notes that are on my worktop. Therefore, I can also continue to do what I was doing on my phone. So basically, we got to the stage where we were looking at the present perfect tense, where I said, Isata has fed the chickens already. And that was in my active voice. I'm now going to give you a sentence in the passive voice. The chickens have been fed by Isata already. That's one variation. The chickens Obviously, that's a plural subject now, so I use the verb have. I brought in a new word, been, B-E-E-N, been, which is actually an auxiliary that I borrowed from the verb to be. To recap, when we started, I said to form the passive voice, I'm going to be using these words. Is, are, been, B-E-N, been, B-E-I-N-G. And I'm going to be using from the verb to have, H-A-V-E, and sometimes I might use H-A-S. So basically, in this my example, I have an adverb already, an adverb of time. That is a versatile adverb. Have a look at my sentence on the screen, please. With my adverb, I can put it anywhere that I want, as long as it makes sense. I'm going to say, the chickens have already been fed by Isata. That's variation number 2. Shall we move on to the present perfect continuous? Ladies and gentlemen, having worked with me so long, whether you hear a continuous tense, you're expecting to have an ing verb. The main verb is going to be ending in ing. Isata has been feeding the chicks since they were born. Isata has been feeding the chicks since they were born. So we break up my sentence into different segments. Are you ready? Isata is a proper noun. It is a subject. I could have replaced that with she, the female pronoun, the female subject pronoun. Isata is the subject. Has been feeding is a verb phrase. Has been feeding is in the present continuous. Has been feeding is in the present perfect continuous tense. The chicks is my object. Since they were born is my adverbial clause. I could put my adverbial clause in parentheses. I'm going to do that. That's because it's versatile, it's movable. I can put it wherever I want in the passive voice. I'm going to focus on my object, the chicks. Please have a look at the sentence on the screen. The chicks have been fed by Isata. The chicks have, plural, been fed by Isata since they were born. Please have a look at my sentence on the screen. Are you still with me? What have I done there? The chicks have been fed by Isata since they were born. Did you say that the past participle of feeding is fed? Do you remember when I said you could look it up in Collins English Dictionary, and that is the third form of the verb? Because since they were born is an adverbial clause, I can move it. I'm calling it an adverbial clause because there is a subject and there is a verb, but it doesn't make complete sense by itself. It's an adjunct. It adds additional information. I can move it if I want. Since they were born, the chicks have been fed by Isata. Since they were born, the chicks have been fed by Iceta. The chicks, since they were born, have been fed by Iceta. So did you see my preposition by? It precedes the subject now in the passive voice. My original subject was Iceta. So in the passive voice, by has come next to Iceta. At this point, you can take a break if you like. I'm going to move on to past tenses. So when you come back, you can fast forward to past tenses to continue. Past tenses in the passive voice. I'm going to start off with a past simple tense. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're unfamiliar with the 12 basic tenses, modal verbs and tenses, the infinitive, they're all on my page. Iceta fed the chicks yesterday afternoon. Iceta fed the chicks yesterday afternoon. Fed is in the past simple. That's in the active voice because my subject, Iceta, is acting on the verb fed. Fed is followed by an object phrase, the chickens. Again, I'm going to put my adverbial phrase, I'm going to put it in parentheses just so I don't get confused. Have a look at my sentence on the screen, please. Have you identified your object? The chickens. So, flipping the sentence with me, would it read like this? The chickens. What are you going to use? It's the past simple. You're going to use the past tense of the verb to be. The chickens were, plural. The chickens were plus the past participle. Excuse me. The chickens were fed by Iceta yesterday afternoon. That's one variation. Could you also have said yesterday afternoon the chicks were fed by Iceta? Iceta fed the chickens yesterday afternoon was what I started with, wasn't it? The active voice. Passive is the chickens were fed by Iceta yesterday afternoon. Shall we move on to the past continuous tense? Wherever you hear continuous tense, you're going to be looking out for what? An ing. And you know the rule now because I've already gone over that. So you expect me to use the word being in the passive voice. That's going to be an auxiliary. I'm going to be using anti. First of all, please have a listen to my sentence. Iceta was feeding the chickens when I rang her. Iceta was feeding the chickens when I rang her. Please have a look at my sentence on the screen. Past continuous. I'm going to put when I rang her, my adverbial clause, in brackets. I'm using very simple sentences so that once you've got the hack of things, once your confidence has grown, we can move on to complex sentences. Iceta is my subject, was feeding is my verb phrase, the chicks is my object, when I rang her is my adverbial clause. I'm going to put that in parentheses. The reason why it's a clause is because I've got I there, which is the subject. I've got a verb, which is rang. When I rang her is a clause. It actually makes sense on its own. It's an adverbial clause of time. What will my passive voice sound like? The chickens, plural, were plus being, B-E-I-N-G, being fed by Iceta when I rang her. The chickens were being fed by Iceta when I rang her. Please have a look at the sentence on the screen. So, shall we look at the past perfect tense? Here's my sentence. Iceta had fed the chickens before she left for work. Please have a look at that. Iceta had fed the chickens before she left for work. That's in the active voice. I'm going to go quiet so you can break it up into segments on your own before I give you the answer. So, did you have the chicks had plus been, B-E-E-N, fed by Iceta before she went to work? The chicks plus had plus been, B-E-N, fed by Iceta before she went to work. Did you try to move your adverbial clause into another part of the sentence because it's versatile? Did you have before she went to work? It wouldn't make sense this time, would it? So we're going to stick with our original sentence. The chicks had been fed by Iceta before she went to work. Because if I were to say before she went to work, the chicks had been fed by Iceta, it sounds unnecessarily complicated. So have a look at my sentence on the screen, please, ladies and gents. Are you ready for the next one? How about the past perfect continuous tense? Iceta had been feeding the chicks corn before the vet suggested organic seeds. Have a look at the sentence on the screen, please. Aisata is my subject. Had been feeding is my verb in the past perfect continuous tense. The chicks is my object. Actually, I've now got an object phrase. The chicks corn. Because it's important to say what she was feeding them as well. Feeding the chicks corn. The chicks corn is actually important, so I'm going to stick with that as my object phrase. It's a nominal phrase. And also, I'm going to put before the vet suggested organic seeds. I'm going to put that in parentheses. Shall we put that in the passive voice? We're going to start with the object. The chicks had been fed corn. Because it's important to say what the chicks were being fed. So look at what I did with my object phrase there. The chicks had been fed corn. Can you see what I did? By Aisata before the vet suggested organic seeds. Please have a look at my sentence on the screen. Shall we rewrite that sentence? Before the vet suggested organic seeds, the chicks had been fed corn by Aisata. Please have a look at my variation on the screen. We can leave out the phrase by Aisata if we wish. Sentences in the passive voice are often shorter as irrelevant information is omitted. Sometimes they're longer, but often they're shorter. Here's another option. The chicks had been fed corn before the vet suggested organic seeds. Please have a look at my sentence on the screen. If it's important to say who performed the action, then you might want to keep the by Aisata part of your sentence. If it's not essential to say who performed the action, then you might want to leave it out. Suppose you work in the legal sector, or suppose you're a police constable, you might need that information. I'm going to say the missile was thrown by Joe Bloggs into the victim's house. If I said the missile was thrown into the victim's house, I haven't implicated my suspect. To implicate my suspect, I would have said the missile was thrown by Joe Bloggs into the victim's house. So when the by whoever does it is essential in the semantics of the sentence or in conveying information, we would retain it. I want to name my subject, so I've said by Aisata. Ladies and gentlemen, you might want to pause the video at this stage if you're worried about your data. You may take a break if you wish to do so at this point. So I'm going to move on to future tenses. When you come back, if you want to continue watching the video, remember we're now at part 3, which is future tenses. With future forms, the passive voice is constructed with be plus past participle or being plus past participle. Please have a look at my construction on the screen. Sentence number 1 in the future simple tense. They will serve cassava leaves at my nan's birthday party. They will serve cassava leaves at my nan's birthday party. It's in the active voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please have a look at the sentence on the screen. Have you identified the subject? It's they, isn't it? The plural subject pronoun is, however, an unnamed subject. It's immaterial in the passive voice to ask whether that subject is retained or not. So if we don't retain it, it's inconsequential to the meaning of the phrase that we're going to have. It won't have an impact on the meaning of the new sentence that we're going to construct. Cassava leaves is now my subject. My verb phrase will serve. How am I going to flip that? I'm going to bring in a new word, be. It looks like the auxiliary of the verb to be, but here I'm going to bring in a new word, be. It looks like the infinitive of the verb to be. Here it's going to work as an auxiliary or a helping verb. So, cassava leaves will be served at my nan's birthday party. At my nan's birthday party, it's a preposition followed by what? What type of phrase is that? My nan's birthday party. Did you notice how I've introduced a new word, the auxiliary from the verb to be E? I said to form the passive voice in the future, we're going to be using be plus past participle, or we're going to be using being plus past participle. Are you ready for my next sentence? Are you ready for my next sentence? Isata will be feeding her chickens organic seeds going forward. Isata will be feeding her chickens organic seeds going forward. will be feeding. Future continuous tense. If you're still struggling with the basic tenses, then God help you, because except you're new to my page, I've been belaboring these tenses since I set this page up. Since its inception, I have been looking at tenses because some of the stories and poems I've read, especially from where I was born, Sierra Leone, something's happened to the educational system there. It's just diabolical the way people write, except for a few of you who are probably very middle class and you lived abroad, or your parents are rich enough to send you to private schools. If you went to state schools like myself, I went to the Methodist Girls' High School and then Albert Academy. If you went to them state schools, then God help you. God help you, because I don't know what's happening with the English syllabus there, the way it's being taught. And if you speak a beautiful language like Chichewa, because the ways the phonology and the morphology work, you're going to struggle with English, aren't you? Okay, Aishita will be feeding her chickens organic seed going forward. I'm not a linguist, by the way. I don't try and misrepresent myself on social media like some people. I'm not a linguist. All I know is basic English grammar. Are you ready for the future continuous tense? Whatever you hear continuous tense, you're going to expect me to have a main verb ending in ing. And this is why I'm going to use being to show that the action was going on at the minute when the speaker uttered the statement. When the statement was uttered or written down, the verb was in its continuous tense. The action was ongoing. We are not going to need both Aishita and the personal pronoun her in the passive voice. Instead, we are going to say, her chickens will be fed organic seeds going forward. What was my first sentence? Aishita will be feeding her chickens organic seeds going forward. I'm not going to say her chickens will be fed organic seeds by Aishita going forward. It doesn't make sense. It's too much information and it just sounds clumsy. My sentence sounded clumsy. So I don't want to use my possessive pronoun her and by at the same time. I'm going to be economical. How about we say her chickens will be fed organic seeds going forward? Please have a look at the sentence on the screen. What did you drop? Did you drop the her? Did you say the chickens will be fed organic seeds by Aishita going forward? Well, whose chickens are they then? We want to retain ownership. Her chickens will be fed organic seeds by Aishita going forward. It's too much. I have said her chickens will be fed organic seeds going forward. But you're going to say, well, who's going to feed them? Okay, her chickens will be fed organic seeds by Aishita going forward. Technically, that's a sentence, but it's just too wordy. Shall we look at the future perfect tense? Aishita will have fed her chicks before Alimami arrives to take her out. Future perfect tense. Aishita will have fed her chicks before Alimami arrives to take her out. Please have a read of the sentence. Are you ready for the next one? That was in the active voice. the passive voice would be, the chicks will have been fed by Isata before Alimami arrives to take her out. What have I done there? The chicks was my object. Will plus have plus been plus fed. That's a verb in the passive voice. What have I introduced? Now, you know, you're going to be very good at doing this because you understand what the basic rules are. Isata will have fed her chicks. I'll flip that to the chicks. I don't want to keep using her because I'm going to use by. I just want to show you another variation. The chicks will have plus BEEN plus fed by Isata. How about my adjunct, my phrase that I could have left out? Before Alimami arrives to take her out. My adverbial clause. Before Alimami arrives to take her out, the chicks will have been fed by Isata. How about if we use another variation? Before Alimami arrives to take her out, her chicks will have been fed. The chicks will have been fed by Isata before Alimami arrives to take her out. Please have a look at my variations on the screen. I have used the auxiliary BEEN. The chicks will have been eating organic corn for a week this Sunday as part of their diet. Future perfect continuous. Will plus have plus been plus eaten. Please have a read of my sentence on the screen. This is a lengthy sentence. As we move up the 12 basic tenses, my sentences are getting longer. Have you noticed I have elongated my sentences? Also because perfect tenses need an adjunct, an object phrase, sometimes make them make sense semantically. We need to help the verb with other words that carry the meaning on, so the sentence reads semantically. Also, I want to move up to longer sentences, show you how they work as well in the passive voice. The chicks will have been eating organic corn for a week this Sunday as part of their diet. Let's break this down. The chicks is my subject. Will have been eating is my verb phrase. Organic corn is my object. For a week this Sunday as part of the diet is just additional information. All that is doing is just adding more information. Put that in parentheses for now. Focus on your object. Organic corn. Shall we try and flip this one? Organic corn will have been eaten by the chicks for a week this Sunday as part of their diet. Organic corn will plus have plus been plus eaten by the chicks for a week this Sunday as part of the diet. And that concludes the 12 basic tenses. I'm going to move on to modal verbs. With modal verbs, you remember what modal verbs are? Shall we quickly go back to the tenses shop?
Hello and welcome to the Tenses Shop. We sell all the 12 basic tenses and some secondary ones as well. Would you like a modal verb, please? Yes, please. May I have? Can and could, may and might, must, ought to, I don't want dare. I suppose I should take should and shall. I will have will and would. Do you have any other part-time or semi-modal verbs on sale, please? Ta.
Okay, so with modals and with infinitive forms, the passive is formed with be plus past participle. Otherwise, the passive voice is formed with have been plus past participle. Please have a look at the sentence on the screen. It's unusual. We haven't had a sentence with President Bill in it yet. I promise there's a sentence with President Bill coming up now. Do you want to hear the sentence with President Bill? So my sentence with President Bill is, they should have booked a chauffeur for President Bill before he arrived at Lunge Airport. You knew there was going to be a sentence with President Bill. They is the subject, should is the modal, have booked is the present perfect, chauffeur is the object, for President Bill is the object phrase. A chauffeur for President Bill is also the object phrase. Before he arrived at Lunge Airport, you could put that in parentheses for now. So, should have booked could also be the modal perfect tense. Well, I'm going to start off with the first part of my object phrase. A chauffeur. A chauffeur should have been booked for President Bill before he arrived at Lunge Airport. Please have a look at my sentence. That's now in the passive voice. Did you see what I've done? Should plus have plus been plus booked. I've now got a different preposition, F or R. I don't need the preposition by. My subject is also unnamed, so why I haven't got a chauffeur should have been booked by them is because it's irrelevant information. Who's them? It's not, we haven't named the subject. A chauffeur should have been booked for President Bill before he arrived at the airport. So we vary that sentence. Before he arrived at Lunge Airport, a chauffeur should have been booked for President Bill. So we'll move on to the last bit. You've done very well. So finally, let's look at infinitive and direct speech. First of all, direct speech. You might end up with liver disease, the doctor warned Joseph. Because I couldn't say the word sclerosis, I think is the word I can say it. You might end up with liver disease, the doctor warned Joseph. Your example on the skin is different. Passive in reported speech. Joseph was warned by the doctor that he might end up with liver disease. Different word on the script. Are you ready for the final bit now before I go do my house chores? Infinitive verbs in the passive voice. Infinitive comes in two forms, to hold or the base or dictionary form hold, without the preposition or with it. Let's use an example from England this time. Belmarsh Prison is going to hold the armed robber. Active voice. Belmarsh Prison is going to hold the armed robber. To hold is a verb in its infinitive form. Don't worry so much about the verb is going. Don't worry too much about the present continuous tense. I want you to focus on to hold for now, please. So I'm going to flip that because the armed robber is my object. The armed robber will be held at Belmarsh Prison. To hold becomes be held. And the public wants to nominate you, Lemo, for this year's Miss Malawi contest. The public wants to nominate you, Lemo, for this year's Miss Malawi contest. The public wants you, Lemo, to be nominated for this year's Miss Malawi contest. Have a look at my two sentences and see which one makes sense. Finally, the accident hurt Mavuto, past simple. The accident hurt Mavuto, past simple. In the past simple tense, we have a variation that we could have used. We could have said Mavuto got hurt in the accident. G-O-T. Mavuto got hurt in the accident. So that's it. Ooh, that's all the tenses you'd ever work with in English in the active and passive voice.